So here we are in May. Summer is peeking its sweaty nose around the corner, but the topic of this episode of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast is Christmas. Specifically, Another Lonely Christmas, the B-side to I Would Die For You from the Purple Rain album. Joining me to discuss Another Lonely Christmas, first-time podcast guest, Todd Sanzone. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you joining me for this very first episode of yours, Another Lonely Christmas. So as a first-time podcast guest, I think it would be a good idea to maybe give the listeners, a little bit of a history of who you are and what your history with Prince is, where you first started listening to him, how you really got into him. What is like your Prince story?
Awesome. Happy to share. So, and I'm going to go in sort of two different directions with this a little bit without hopefully being too long-winded. First, musically, I've never been musically inclined personally. In fact, my cousins and I sort of joke that it skipped our generation, the talent. But my father and my uncle were both musicians. And so from a very, very young age, first of all, I just had music playing around all the time, in the house, in the car, singing along, whatever. And then as I got a little bit older, I started being toted around to gigs that my father was doing. And at the time that I came on the scene, in the mid to late 70s, he was in a wedding band. So it was a cover band that was playing parties and such. And so I got to hear him play hits that were on the radio at the time. But before I came along and before he married my mom in the early and mid 60s, he was in my dad was. He was in a popular band here I now live in Virginia, but I grew up in Baltimore. So he was in a popular band in the Baltimore area, in the surrounding areas. A bunch of white guys whose lead singer voice was quite dynamic, and his upper register, he could sound very much like Smokey Robinson. So they played this awesome mix of the flavor of the time, which was Motown, up and coming at that time, and British Invasion stuff. So they've got some sort of psychedelic pop songs, and then they've got their most popular record was a song actually written by Smokey Robinson, who had heard them play and liked them and gave them a song of his to record. And Smokey recorded it himself as well on one of his records. I can't remember which. But anyway, so I've got a little bit of musical pedigree, even though, again, I didn't pick up the talent. Mm-hmm. So anyway, music was always part of my DNA, if you will. And then fast forward to now my entree into the Prince world, maybe a little bit cliche, but being of an age, I was perfectly set up to find Prince at the Purple Rain era, this era that we're discussing, right? So I like to say that I was at the perfect place at the right time, at the right age, when Doves Cry hit the radio in May 1984. I had just turned 12 years old. It came out a couple of days after my 12th birthday. And that song captured my attention like none I'd ever heard. And I just remember my hands hovering over the radio dial, literally to wait for the radio to play When Doves Cry every hour on the hour, so I could blast it and listen as closely as I could, and eventually hit record on my tape player so I could get a copy of it clean without the DJ talking over it. And so from that point forward, I was all in. I mean, almost instantly. And then as time went on, it's a funny little story. I was 12 years old again, and the Purple Rain phenomena hit that summer. It was, 2 number one singles and a hit movie and then the album, and it was Purple Rain summer, right? So, but I didn't have the record. My folks didn't get me the record. I didn't go and get the record. I didn't have my own ways and means to go out and buy stuff yet. So, I was chomping at the bit, and finally the quarter one of my school year that fall, I got good grades. My folks asked me what I wanted. They'd give me a little treat. And I said, I want Purple Rain. So I can clearly remember my folks coming home. I think my dad probably came home from work one day, had the record in his hand, and I was so excited. I tore open the packaging, and I pulled out the record. I'm reading the lyrics just right there in front of them. And at the time, this would have been like late October, 1984. local radio stations in the DC Baltimore market were playing every song on that record. Single or no, they were playing it. And so right around that time, Darling Nikki started getting some airtime. And they edited out the one word, right? But they were playing it. And so my mom was like, let me see that for a minute. Let me see what this word is they're editing out. Right?
Right.
And so she's reading lyrics. She's like, oh no, I don't think you can have this. And I grabbed that back out of her hand and ran like a bat out of hell down the hall, locked myself in my bedroom and started playing that record. And there was no way she was getting it back. So that's my story.
That's your story, and you're sticking to it.
That's right.
Okay. I mean, I would say that sounds very, very similar to my story that I've mentioned several times on the show about When Doves Cry is a very special song. So it hit a lot of people in the right way, even if it wasn't the very first song you heard of Prince's. Something about that song, I think, really resonated with a lot of us at a certain age, and just how different it sounded from so much of what else was on the pop radio stations at the time.
Exactly. Yes.
Its uniqueness really set it apart.
Yes.
And sometimes uniqueness doesn't get rewarded in pop music or in popular culture. Sometimes uniqueness is a detriment in success, and sometimes in music, but that wasn't the case with When Doves Cry. So Another Lonely Christmas is the song we're talking about today. And the song has quite a few lyrics to it. There's quite a few verses in this song. Prince sings a lot of lines here. He's trying to tell a story, right? So this is kind of like a story song.
Yep.
And before we get too far into it, though, I do like to always provide a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of background on a song that we're covering. So as I mentioned, Another Lonely Christmas was the B-side to I Would Die For You, which was the album's fourth single. I Would Die For You was released as a single in November 28th of 1984, so really just in time to kick off the 1984 holiday season. Prince had recorded the song back in February of the same year, but you can imagine he was holding on to it. I mean, it wasn't going to make the final track listing for Purple Rain. It didn't have a place in the movie at all. I mean, thematically, the plot of the song and the plot of the film had nothing in common, so it really didn't make any sense for this song to be on the soundtrack. But he was holding on to it. I just imagine waiting for an opportunity to slap it on as a B-side around Christmas time. And I Would Die For You just happened to be the song that was released right in time for the 84 holiday season. So, hey, I've got this song I wrote. It's got Christmas in the title. Let's get it out there, and maybe, it's an opportune moment to let this song kind of shine. And I thought that was interesting, holding on to a song like that.
Yeah.
Another interesting fact about the song is that Prince only played this song once live, December 26th, 1984, the day after Christmas, 84. There was a charity show that he was performing at in St. Paul at the Civic Center Arena there, and he performed this song. And that was the one and only time he ever played it live. So, there's songs that he's never played live. There's songs that he's played live only a handful of times. And just one time, though, is kind of a unique situation. And the song, falls into that category of one and done for Prince.
The question for me is not so much when you released it, because you're right, it was the perfect timing. It was the launch of the holiday season that year, and it would have put a Christmas song on the back of a single, and maybe it might even boost sales, right? So who knows? People thought, with just looking at the title, people maybe thought, Prince wrote a Christmas song. This should be interesting. Probably they were surprised. But the question for me is, recording it in February, you have a Christmas song, they recorded it 2 months after the holidays of the previous year. Kind of odd. I have this thought in my head where maybe he had the title, or maybe just Lonely Christmas or Christmas ? Written in this purple notebook somewhere, and with the thought of maybe I'll come back to this at some point. And then all of a sudden, based on the way that we know he often created it just came to him one night, and he decided he had to get to the studio to record the song. Because you're right, it is kind of a one-off. There's nothing quite like it. And I looking at Dwayne Tudall's book, which is the Bible, right? He's,
right.
So two other songs were recorded that week. You had Nude Rendezvous, which ended up with Sheila E., and you had Pop Life. So he was already into his next record by that time. And then Another Lonely Christmas. Those were the 3 songs that were put on tape that week in February. So it was just sort of a weird thing to fit in among his other songs that he was working on at the time.
Yeah. It's interesting for sure that those were all recorded around the same time, because they all kind of have like this. They talk about different things, but none of them would I consider to be joyous songs.
Yeah, agreed.
Songs that have like really happy themes or really upbeat. So maybe Prince was kind of feeling a little down when he was writing and recording these songs all in a row like this. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that also opens up a debate. Is this really a Christmas song?
Right.
I think it is personally, because you have Christmas in the title. You can't put Christmas in the title without people thinking it's a Christmas song. Whatever your intentions were, it's going to always be considered a Christmas song if you throw the holiday in the title of the song and in the chorus. It's just, there's no way around that.
Exactly. And he actually mentions December 25th in one of the verses too. So
yeah. So whether or not, yes, you could replace the word Christmas in the song with any holiday, and it wouldn't really change anything. You just have to change the date.
Yep.
that his girlfriend died. But at the end of the day, its song isn't so much about Christmas as it is about death, really, and mourning.
Yes.
It's a very melancholy song with a lot of sentimentality, a lot of nostalgia, especially in the first couple of verses of the song. But it's also a very lonely and sad song as well. It's that's to me, that's the overarching theme of the song, is just loneliness and despair. It's a bit depressing, and that's not usually something you think of when you think of Christmas songs. You don't think of despair, loneliness, and depression, or sadness. But those are kind of like some of the feelings this song invokes in the listener, because of how it's performed and what he's saying in the song. But there's also, with the whole sentimentality and nostalgia, there's some lighter moments in the lyrics, and as we start going through them, we can highlight those. But I wouldn't say that's the overarching theme of the song, though, isn't light and jolly. Would you agree?
Agreed. Yeah, this is definitely a twist, 180 degrees from a standard holiday song. Definitely melancholy, definitely, thought-provoking to a degree. As a funny little exercise leading up to our conversation, I just I use Apple Music for my listening, and I just searched in Apple Music for Another Lonely Christmas. And there are some other songs out there by other artists named Another Lonely Christmas. None of them covers or related to this song. And just a few, so not many. But all of them, I didn't listen to all of them, but the lyrics, I guess, would be about loneliness, because lonely is in the title. But for the most part, just musically, when I listened to a snippet of each one, they sounded much more cheerful, even though it was a lonely song. This one certainly is not. This one is definitely a blues, or a feeling the blues kind of song, and a sad look at what is a fictional song. Princess said a fictional song, but it's one about death. So
yeah, right, and it is important to kind of mention that this isn't an autobiographical song that Prince wrote to relate a story of something that happened to him in his past. This is a purely fictional song with fictional lyrics, sung by a fictional character. So
right.
Just keeping that in mind as we go through it. So right off the bat, the song starts off with the chorus, which is kind of also a unique thing. It's not that common. It's not that common of a thing, period, and it's not that common of a thing that Prince did, as far as, at least up to this point in his career. I I don't know if you noticed that at all, Todd, with the whole starting off with the chorus thing.
I did, and there's something to be taken from that. I think it's almost a little trick of the trade in this case, because just looking at the chorus, well, he didn't have to start with the chorus necessarily to achieve this, but if you just look at the chorus, you don't know that someone's died. You just know that they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
You should have been there, but it doesn't mean they're gone permanently. It just means they're gone out of his life. And then you don't learn until later that, oops, something more has happened here.
Oh yeah, that is one of the fascinating things about this song. Is it's kind of like the plot device. Like if this was a film or a TV show, that moment would be like the moment where there's like this plot twist in it. Right. Like you think it's going one way, and you think he's just talking about somebody that left him, or he's feeling really sad about the end of a relationship. He's trying to convince this woman to come back to him. Right. And then you find out about halfway through the song, because of the lyrics in a verse, that he's singing about somebody who's passed, who's deceased. And that would be like, if you were watching a movie, that would be a plot twist. It's like,
exactly.
You don't necessarily see it coming. He doesn't give us any clues throughout the song that this is somebody that he's singing to that is no longer with us. So I do find that fascinating. Okay, so as we've kind of mentioned, there's a lot of darkness in this song, and I'll just read the chorus first because that's what he does. Last night I spent another lonely Christmas. Darling, darling, you should have been there. 'Cause all the ones I dream about, you are the one that makes my love shout. You see, you are the only one I care for. So right off the bat, the chorus is telling us he's, alone. The title of the song is repeated, Another Lonely Christmas. And by leading it off with last night, I spent another lonely Christmas, you get visually that it's now the day after. It's kind of like it's like a hangover, maybe like a sorrow hangover. Mm-hmm. Actually, you find out later it's probably a literal hangover that he's singing about in some ways.
Right.
But yeah, he's reminiscing. He's wishing that his lover, his girlfriend, we don't really know what kind of a relationship they had. He doesn't explicitly say, but the girl of his dreams, the girl he was with, is not with him anymore, and he's had to spend Christmas alone, or he chose to spend Christmas alone because she wasn't there.
Yeah, and it's more than just the day after. I mean, it is literally the day after this Christmas, but it's been at least 2 Christmases because he says another lonely Christmas. So it's been maybe a year or more after the actual death. Of course, we learn later that this person, his lover, his fictional lover, actually passed away on the 25th day of December. We just don't know what year it happened. So this could be 1 year later. It could be several years later.
Yeah.
But he's been sitting on this loneliness for a while.
Yep. At this point, we don't know how long. We learn later, like you said, though, but at this point, we don't know. We just know that it's a repeating event.
Yep.
All right. So then after singing this, and the song, the way the song is structured is there's a lot of lyrics, but they're sung in succession. There's not a lot of music interludes.
Right.
You get the music later on. Remember the time we swam naked in your father's pool. Boy, he was upset that night, but boy, was that ever cool. Remember that night we played Pokino for money and you robbed me blind? Remember how you used to scream so loud 'cause you hated that number 9? Hey, I saw your sister skating on the lake this afternoon. Good heaven, how she's grown. She swoons the boy skaters 'cause she's so tall. But of all your father's children, baby, you know you are the finest of them all. You are brighter than the northern star. That makes up basically the first couple of verses. He has a pause after the number 9. Mm-hmm. But I'm grouping them together because they kind of are all doing the same thing. They're providing the listener some backstory. Right. They're providing us a chance to reminisce with Prince, with the singer, about this lover that he's lost. So what are some of the things here in these section of lines, Todd, that you find interesting or that you take away from it?
Well, I think you touched on it. It's reminiscing the good times. And here in this verse or verses, you get the sense that there were some fun times. And often Prince's fun times kind of sway into the sexual, but this really doesn't. It's just about they're playing games, they're skinny dipping in the pool. It's just fun. And so I take that away, and of course, Prince is doting on her too. So he not only sees her as a friend, someone to live life with and have fun with, but also he calls her out as the finest of them all. And so he is definitely full of adoration for her. Mm-hmm. So that's clear. And so that's when he gets a little bit more serious toward the end there, as far as his feelings for her. But otherwise, it's just smiling and remembering the good times.
I really like how he puts the details in this section. Like, he's not just saying, remember that time that we had fun at the pool, or remember how we used to play cards. Like, it gets really detailed here. Like, they didn't just swim, they swam naked. They went skinny dipping in her dad's pool. Like, if I was a father and my daughter was in my pool naked with her boyfriend, I wouldn't be too thrilled with that.
Right.
And so he makes sure that we know that he was upset that night.
Right.
But we thought it was funny as hell, basically.
Yep.
And then the whole Pokino for money, I mean, that's a very specific card game. They didn't just play poker or some other game that is more commonly known. I don't really know much about Pokino, and we talked a little bit beforehand.
Yep.
Neither of us are really familiar with this game, but it exists. It's a thing, so they must have had that in common, that they both knew how to play this game, and they enjoyed it. That was something they enjoyed doing together, which is cool to add that detail here.
Agreed. And that is a funny detail, and one that, like you said, we talked about a little bit beforehand. I didn't know what Pokino was. In fact, I think all along, without having researched the lyrics, I think I thought it was something else. I didn't know Pokino was the actual name of the game. But anyway, I finally looked it up, and I was like, okay, what is this? I have no clue. Is this a real thing or something Prince World made up? And nope, it's a real game, and I'm guessing he's played it. So it's like it's a board game, but it's sort of a combination played with a deck of cards somewhere between poker and Keno.
Yeah, hence the name.
So, hence the name, exactly. So, and it looks like it might be kind of fun. So I actually went ahead and ordered a game for myself and my family to play. So I'm going to have some Pokino to play next week. So I'll let you know how that goes.
So yeah, I'll be asking questions about how the Pokino nights are going in your house.
You'll have a full report. No worries.
And the other thing about this section, I get like halfway through when he says he saw her sister skating on the lake, and I kind of get the sense like it was maybe this event that maybe sparked this whole trip down memory lane. And there's her little sister that's all grown up now, and that also kind of gives us a clue that this has been a while.
Yeah.
It's not like he's saying that she is all grown up. She's gotten so much bigger. So there must have been some period of time that has passed since they've been together, and he's singing this song for her to have literally grown, and she's gotten so tall, and now she's making all the boys swoon. So she's basically doing what his girlfriend did years ago, was a looker, was what we have to assume. But he wants to make sure, like, I saw your little sister, she's really attractive now, she's all grown up, but don't worry, of all your father's children, you're still the finest of them all. I'm not saying, I've got eyes on your little sister now. I'm just pointing out that she's all grown up, and it kind of made me reminisce about, you again. And so I don't know if that was intended, like this whole event of seeing her sister sparked this memory, because something tells me that he goes through this character that Prince is singing from goes through this every single Christmas as well.
For sure. I get the sense. I think you're right. Christmas is an automatic touchstone for people. So if something terrible happens or something good happens, and it happens on a holiday, it's just sort of exacerbated, if you will. Maybe that's the wrong word, but it's brought more to the fore because it happened on Christmas or on whatever. And so I think he was already in that mindset because of the holiday, but then he had to throw in too, like, this is maybe the seeing of her sister on the lake is what prompted him to sit down and write about it. versus actually remembering it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that also, you bring up a good point with that, the whole writing. So at this point in the song, we don't know what's going on here. Is he having a literal conversation with her?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't get that personally, but one could think it's just a very one-sided conversation. He's talking to her, found her somehow, is able to get a hold of her. Or is he writing a letter? You know, like, I don't know, like you run into an old flame over the holiday season. You, like, let's say hypothetically you've left town or whatever. You've broken up with this girl. You left town. Maybe she left town. And you know how it goes, especially when you're maybe a little bit younger and you haven't started a family of your own. A lot of times they'll come back to the towns they grew up in, where their parents live, if they've left, to spend the holidays there, and meeting up with old friends or even old flames. And so one could even think of it from that perspective, that he's run into her again, like he's visiting town and he ran into her, or vice versa. She's visiting from out of town and they ran into each other, and he started like, oh, hey, do you have time to chat? I want to tell you about all this, what happened to me. I saw your sister, and God, you remember the good times we had?
Yeah.
So it's just another way of thinking of how this song is being presented.
Sure.
So now he's in a nostalgic and sentimental mood, but towards the end of those lines, you get he's starting to think more deeply about this person. Then he goes back into the chorus again. So after the second chorus is sung, we have a point here now where there's a difference in how the lyrics go between the original 7-inch version, which is a just under 5-minute song. It's already kind of long song because of so many lyrics.
Right.
But there's also an extended version of the song that was on the 12-inch version of I Would Die For You. That's well over 6 minutes. And that includes additional instrumentation towards the end of the song. But there's an additional verse here. And this additional verse gives a little more, it's more along the same lines as the first section, with reminiscing and bringing up things that they used to do, and he's basically asking her to remember back when, remember the time we did this, remember the time we did that. And I can see why he took these lines out. Do you still like banana daiquiris? Boy, we used to get so tight. Oh, you used to get so horny. You made me leave the lights on. I'd pay money just to see your laughing, dancing silhouette upon the pier. Sometimes I think I hear you smiling. Sometimes I think you're here. I find myself holding every pillow in the bed you and I used to share. Last night I spent another lonely Christmas. Darling, you should be there. So the version that most people got, if you just bought the 7-inch of I Would Die For You, doesn't have any of those lines in it. It's almost like bonus lyrics if you have the 12-inch version.
Right.
So keep that in mind as we go through the song, because most people don't have this or didn't hear this.
So I have outlined on my paper, just notes in the on the side. I have chorus, verse 1, chorus, verse 2A, chorus, verse 2B, and then chorus, verse 3, chorus. So yeah, this is definitely, it adds more to the backstory. It is, if you want the whole picture, go ahead and listen to that 6-minute version, that whole version, which it got me wondering, because I just don't remember. This is not a single that I had back in the 80s. I did not know the long version existed until years later. And was the long version ever released in any other format up until, or before the Purple Rain Deluxe came out? Do you know?
Not to my knowledge, because the version that was on the Hits and B-Sides collection was 93.
Was the edit.
Yes, was the 7-inch edit.
So at some point along the line, I must have picked up an MP3 of the longer version. So I've had it for a while. I don't know. But I didn't actually get an official version of it until the last couple of years. And so there's a good chance that many, many people don't know this version at all. So I would definitely encourage folks to seek it out, because it definitely adds some texture to the entirety of the song. But I agree with you. I understand why he took it out. And for me, sort of an ideal version of this song, if I were to play, Prince's editor, would be to leave this verse out, but keep on the extra musical stuff at the end, because there's some beautiful music, and we can get to that later, but it's really pretty, and I think it I think it adds to the song at the end. But yeah, this verse is, and here's Prince, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of times when he starts reminiscing, or when he starts having fun, it's of a sexual nature. Well, here he is. He's drinking banana daiquiris and talking about how she used to get so horny. So he just he can't stay away from that side of his personality too long. So he mentions that, and but still, it's more of a whimsical reminiscing of their fun times together before it goes too far into the seriousness of what has transpired.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, after that, then he gets the chorus again, which is not sang again on the 7-inch version because he just sang the chorus. So why would he sing it twice in a row?
Right.
So after this bonus verse, he sings the chorus again on the 12-inch.
And I think this is the chorus. This version of the chorus is the one that ends up on the 7-inch. I think the previous chorus is the one that was edited out.
Yeah, and there's a little different in how he sings some of the later lines as well on the 12 versus the 7th, I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting thing. You would think that it was just one take and then they just edited a couple things out, but I don't think it was. I think there were like 2 different takes.
Yeah.
I don't know this for a fact, but I guess maybe I need to look at the Dwayne Tudall book to find that out for sure.
Right.
Like you said, it's the Purple Rain era Bible. So
my memory of my reading, because I just checked into it last night, this was all, I don't know how many takes, but this was all done in one afternoon. And then they just came back and did some things in post. But for the most part, this was he only did this song on that particular day. And so he rocked it out in a relatively short span of time.
Okay, so then the next lines that we get, my mama used to say, always trust your lover. But now I guess that only applies to her. And at this point, he has this pause. Like normally the lines are being sung in a very traditional way, line after line after line. But he pauses here for effect. I'm not sure exactly why he pauses here. But then he comes back and says, "'Cause baby, you promised me you'd never leave. Then you died on the 25th day of December." And so, right now, this is halfway through the song. He sings of the 7-inch version. I think even the 12-inch version is about halfway through.
Yep.
And now we know what's going on. Now we're finally given a clear picture of why he's singing the song and reminiscing is because she didn't leave him. She didn't break up with him. She died.
Right.
And by the way, she also died on the 25th day of December, which is, of course, Christmas. So,
sure.
Just to add a little melodrama to the whole thing.
Whammo, this was a big thing, and here it is. This is why I'm angst-ridden.
Yeah, and so now we know that he's not, well, we don't know for a fact, but you wouldn't assume that he's now, writing a letter, and we certainly know that he's not speaking to her because he ran into her because he's in town or she's in town, like I had suggested before.
Right.
Now that we know that she's dead, you have to figure he's either, talking to a ghost, talking to her, her gravestone, or maybe, he's just sitting at home, really depressed, and he's just, speaking to no one and just hoping that she'll hear somewhere, wherever she is, she'll hear his words. So it's kind of interesting how he's singing these lines and it's just completely one-sided conversation that he's having. I mean, he could be writing it. It could be a diary entry or something like that. Can't assume that he's just only speaking these lines, but the way I kind of envision it and the imagery I get is either of him visiting her grave or he's home alone, depressed and a little drunk, as we'll find out soon.
Yeah.
What kind of imagery do you get, Tom?
I envision the latter. I guess maybe I'm imposing Prince onto this fictional character, and if that's the case, if this fictional character is anything like Prince, I'm guessing he's home. I'm guessing he's alone, and I'm guessing he's looking at a framed photograph surrounded by candles.
Yeah.
And he's just either thinking or he's speaking aloud to himself and to the photograph, in memory of her. That's the vision that I sort of get.
Yep. Yeah, that works too. I mean, that's what's kind of cool about it is he doesn't exactly say what he's doing or where he's singing from. So we have to come up with that. We have to fill in the blanks ourselves.
Agreed. And, that you just reminded me of another line from Dwayne Tudall's book that I read last night. It's a quote from Prince or I don't know if it was from Prince or if it was, no, it was a combination of things. It was Prince stating of himself and then like Wendy or Lisa also talking of Prince. And they basically said, once the song is out, I don't explain it. It's just there and it's open for your interpretation. And so yeah, I like that too. So
yeah,
I wanted to go back to that verse for a second and do a little housekeeping here, because this contains one of the lines that I always questioned when I was hearing the song without having lyrics in front of me. So the first line of that verse, and you tell me if this is exactly what you have. It says, "My mama used to say, always trust your lover." Is that what you have?
Yes.
Okay. So, and that makes sense, especially based on the next couple of lines. But when I hear it, I've always heard the word trust as either judge or just, not trust. And so in one of the lyric sources that I found, that line is translated as, "Mama used to say, I was just your lover."
Oh.
So I don't know which is correct, but I know to my ear, it never sounded like trust to me. Although again, seeing it written that way makes sense with the rest of the verse. What do you think?
No, I think it totally makes sense with the rest of the verse. But now I'm curious, like, now that you put that in my brain.
I've messed you up. I'm sorry.
No. Like sometimes you can make yourself hear something if you want.
Yep.
So that's not a line that I was questioning. It's not the most intelligible lyrics that he's singing in this song.
Right.
Just the way that he sings it makes it hard to understand a little bit. But it's almost like when you hear the rest of the lines, it allows you to draw your own conclusions as to what's being said. Because of trust your lover, but you promise me you never leave. So he's like, that only applies to her. So to me, I think that makes more sense.
Agreed. My whole life, though, this is the way I read that lyric. My mama used to say, I was judge or lover. That's the way I've always sung it.
Judge or lover? Wow.
I was judge or lover. I don't know.
Well, you know what? That is a pretty fascinating interpretation of those lines. I don't even know where to begin with that. What that would That's almost like another 15-minute conversation if we go down that path.
We can keep on going. I just thought it worth mentioning, and I'll let the listeners decide if they want to go back and pore over that line time and again to figure it out for themselves.
All right, so then after that, we get another chorus, and this is the one part of the chorus one of the choruses where he sings an extra line. It's really nothing significant. He just adds another lonely. Usually it's just one lonely. Now he adds two. And then we get to the next verse, and this is actually the last section of original lyrics for the song. Mm-hmm. And this is where he's once again filling in more of the blanks for us as the listener as to the story. So he says, your father said it was pneumonia, your mother said it was stress, but the doctor said you were dead, and I say it's senseless. Every Christmas night, for 7 years now, I drink banana daiquiris till I'm blind. As long as I can hear you smiling, baby, you won't hear my tears. Another lonely Christmas is mine. Yeah, mine. Another lonely Christmas is mine. So Todd, this last section, what are you taking away from this when you hear it?
Well, first we get more information.
Yeah.
We get that it's been 7 years now. So this has been quite a long time. He's been sitting with this grief, and he still feels it, whether he feels it in continuum for 7 years or whether he just sort of lives with it around the holiday. We don't know, but it's been a long time. And so that's part of it. I also get that, again, according to the story, there was some kind of natural cause. And this is another lyric where I've always heard something different. Although stress makes perfect sense because it rhymes with senseless perfectly, I always heard that word as strep. which would be sort of silly. So that's probably not it, but that's just the way I've always heard it. So just a minor detail there. But you know, in the 7-inch version, this is our first reference to banana daiquiris. So if you're just hearing the edited version, which most people had, I would imagine, you're just getting this reference to banana daiquiris kind of thrown at you out of nowhere. You're like, oh, okay, Prince liked banana daiquiris, or this character liked banana daiquiris. You didn't know, unless you hear the whole version, the long version, that they as a couple used to have this drink and used to enjoy them. So anyway, so that's kind of a thing that comes out of left field if you're just hearing the shorter version. And there's also this reference to hearing you smile, which I think is an interesting lyric. You don't hear people smile, you hear them laugh. Why didn't he say hear you laugh? I don't know. That's a weird kind of thing for me. And I don't know how to translate that. But just the second, I think, time that he says hear you smile. So that's interesting. And, you can't hear tears either. So you won't hear my tears. You can't hear tears. You can hear crying, sobbing, but you don't hear tears. Again, interesting. So those are my takeaways.
Yeah, so my comment to that is the way, well, first of all, if you go back to the verse that was eliminated for the 7-inch version, he says, sometimes I think I hear you smiling. Sometimes I think you're here. So he's kind of said in that verse that this is something that he does. He hears her smiling for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And so this is like a callback to that by, as long as I can hear you smiling, baby, you won't hear my tears. But then it just kind of hit me. He's saying that he's drinking banana daiquiris till he's blind. So he can't see. Mm. So he has to use his other senses. And so one of his other senses is, sound and his ability to hear.
All right, there's the tie-in. I get it. I get it. Just in the context of those couple of lines, if he's blind, well, as long as I can hear you smiling. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a jokey thing, jokey line, because we don't literally think that he's so drunk that he's blind, but anybody who's ever gotten too wasted on alcohol, the room starts spinning and you don't see things straight. Everything's a little bit fuzzy. Drank banana daiquiris till I'm blind. And yeah, of course, if you don't have that 12-inch version, the banana daiquiri line is, like you said, seemingly out of nowhere. It's not typically, it's not a really common drink because it requires, certain liquors, and you have to have bananas to make a banana daiquiri, and you need a blender, and it's just, it's a lot easier just to crack a beer, open a bottle of wine,
right,
or even just have like, a glass of whiskey or rum or something.
Right. Yeah, some work goes into making a daiquiri, and that's another thing that I often think about when I listen to this song. Like Pekino, which I'd never heard of, I'd never really heard of a banana daiquiri. If you go to a restaurant, you get their little drink menu, and you've got strawberry daiquiris, maybe a melon daiquiri, maybe a peach daiquiri. But I don't think banana daiquiri is often on a restaurant menu for drinks. So this is the only reference to banana daiquiris I've ever had throughout the entirety of my life, this song.
Yeah, and so it's like unless they went on some sort of like tropical vacation together and it was on some menu somewhere, and otherwise, yeah, it's not the most common of even daiquiris. So right. It's a very unique drink, and it's very memorable for being so unique, which is, I guess, maybe the point. I wanted to put something in there that was going to be very memorable to the listener. Banana daiquiris. I mean, that is a line. That is just those two words. People listen to this song that know it well. That's the song about his dead girlfriend and he drinks banana daiquiris.
And that's another one of those very specific details that you mentioned earlier on that draws you into the story a little bit. He didn't just talk about drinking. He said specifically, this is what we were drinking. And it happens to be a little bit of an oddity.
Yep. And then some other things about this section of the song. So one, the ambiguity around her death is is a little confusing and frustrating for the listener. Your father said it was pneumonia. Your mother said it was stress. Now, going back to the stress versus strep thing, there are transcribed lyrics on the internet that put strep in their lyrics.
Right.
So you've heard that, and obviously other people have as well because they wrote it on the internet when they were doing like lyric sheets on whatever website it was.
Mm-hmm.
But and I was like, wow, I don't really know for a fact which one it is either. So I went to a different version, the live version. If you go on YouTube, you can access the one time the song was played live on December 26, 1984 at the St. Paul Civic Center Arena. And he sings this song, and it's pretty clearly stress. When he sings that song live, it's stress.
Okay,
so
I need to check it out.
Yeah, because I really wanted to clarify that. If it was still questionable to me, then I would have said, like, okay, I guess it's really open to interpretation. But he says stress. To me, at least to my ears, it's very clear.
Right.
But, the whole ambiguity around her death is, like I said, a little frustrating. If I was her boyfriend and she died, damn it, I would want to know exactly how she died. Don't tell me it's stress. But just look at the death certificate. What does it say? What was the cause of death? What was it documented as? Ask her parents if you really want to know. Maybe at this point, he doesn't care. That's not.
Well,
really...
maybe he's been. Maybe he doesn't talk to her parents because Dad found him naked in the pool and he's not welcome at the house anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it has been 7 years, and we don't get the impression that they were married.
Right.
We don't get the impression that they were like a married couple that had been together for a really long time. We don't know how long they were together, but all we know is it's been 7 years. And so 7 years later, he's still really broken up about this loss. And just thinking also from where Prince was in his life. He was 25 when this song was recorded. You go back 7 years, that puts him at 18.
Right, he was young.
Yeah, he was very young.
If you follow Prince's timeline with the character's timeline, yes, he was in his teens. This
would have been like a teenage relationship.
Sure.
But then again, he's singing the song from a character's perspective, so we don't know how old his character is. So I'm just projecting, where Prince was in his life onto the lyrics of this song. It doesn't mean like this was intended to be a teenage relationship that he's still pining over. But boy, if that's true, she really died young too over pneumonia, so there might have been some other factors there.
Right.
And he is extremely sad still and misses her greatly, misses her dearly after all these years, and uses this holiday to kind of wallow in his despair to some respects. He spends it every single year. He spends it alone. And I almost wonder if he does this intentionally, like he uses this holiday to disengage from others, to be alone, to intentionally be alone, so he can have his time to mourn. You almost like you get a sense that he's relishing this loneliness he feels because he takes ownership of it. Another lonely Christmas is mine. That line. Yeah, you could say it means one thing, but I almost like take away that he's owning up to it. This is mine. I'm taking this Christmas, and I'm going to make it another lonely Christmas because this is what I do. This is how I deal with this. It's mine to deal with. This is my grief.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of also setting a stark contrast between what the rest of the world presumably is doing, because the rest of the world is celebrating Christmas. The rest of the world is reverie, in their reverie for celebrating family and fun and gift giving and all the spiritual meaning behind Christmas. But for him, for now and probably forevermore, he is having his own lonely Christmas and kind of wrapping himself up in that little cocoon. Separating himself from the rest.
Yeah, that's really what my takeaway is of the song in general. Is this is Prince's character, or giving Prince an opportunity to sing a song that's really sad. And I think the fact that this whole song is about death, the death of somebody. You brought up a point when we were talking before about Prince songs that deal with death.
Yeah.
Because we're at the end of the lyrics now. He sings the song, or he sings the chorus one more time, and then we get a lot of the instrumentation. It's a very piano and guitar driven song. It's one of those. It's credited to Prince and the Revolution, but we know this was just Prince doing all the instrumentation. There's no background vocals. It's just Prince. I like the ending of the song. The ending of the song is really cool to me. But from a lyrical standpoint, we're pretty much done. You know, Another Lonely Christmas Is Mine is like the last new lyric we get, and then he goes back to the chorus again, and that's how we end. But talking about death then, and as far as like Prince songs and dealing with the subject of death, you know, there aren't a ton that are as focused, like solely focused on the death of a loved one or a death of somebody that he was close to.
Well, there's one big one that comes to mind automatically, I would think, right? That's Sometimes It Snows in April.
Yes, I was going to say that's the one most people would cite, I would say.
Of course. And then I came up with two others, and they're not necessarily focused on death, but death is certainly a theme. Mm-hmm. They are Moonbeam Levels, which was recorded 2 years prior. And then, because I always like to put things in context, I'm thinking, what was in Prince's mind? When did this get on record? When was it written? So Moonbeam Levels is 2 years early. And then the unreleased Others Here With Us, which was recorded a year later. So those are the only three that I sort of came up with on short order. What about you?
Yeah, those are two good ones. I thought of those. And I think that's the thing about this. You could like cite instances where Prince talks about death or alludes to death in songs that may be like Sign of the Times or something, but that's not really about the death of a loved one or somebody close to him. That's more of like just talking about, you know, the society and some of the social ills that are occurring that involve death of people due to AIDS or nuclear war. Same with 1999. It's never explicitly stated, but you know, there's obviously a theme of death, impending death, but it isn't about the death of a loved one. There's a couple songs in the late 90s that don't explicitly talk about the death of somebody, but if you read into the lyrics, you might be able to draw some conclusions. That's Come Back and the song Wasted Tears. Mm-hmm. Those two songs, you potentially draw some conclusions about them being about death. Sure. And Prince dealing with the death of his son, and you know, it could be really, really sad if you take it into those contexts, and that makes those songs heartbreaking in many ways. Where this song, Another Lonely Christmas, you kind of know. I mean, I always felt like this was a fictional song.
Right. You can feel the emotion in the song, but still remain detached from it because you feel like it's fiction. You feel like it's a story. Whereas you're right. You just brought up the one that I've forgotten, Come Back. I think most people know that's a very personal song. And so I can actually really become saddened if I listen to that song. Sure.
Another Lonely Christmas doesn't make me that sad. I don't know if it's just because I know for a fact it's fictional. The fact that he peppers the song with a lot of humor early on, especially. And it's sang with a lot of emotion, too, but I never really get overly sad when I hear the song, even though I know it's supposed to be.
You just hit on it for me. I put this, you know, when we're just talking about death and lyrics relative to death, there's that little category of short list of songs that kind of pair up with it. But for me, I put it more in terms of the emotional outpouring that Prince gives, his performance gives in this song. You know, the screams and the different emotive ways that he expresses the singing of the lyrics match up more with songs like, for me, The Beautiful Ones even. I mean, I think those two songs align fairly well in terms of emotion. Also, and again, these are all songs that were written around the same time. So you had The Beautiful Ones. These are the ones I wrote down. Condition of the Heart and Empty Room. These are all songs of loss or potential loss of a lover, not necessarily to death, but just being out of their life or potentially out of their life. There's others too, but those are the ones that came immediately to mind for me.
For me personally, the combination of the whimsical lyrics and the fact that it's I just can't relate necessarily personally. Like I don't know anybody that died around a holiday. So this song could really mean something and be very emotional for somebody who had lost someone around a really important holiday or has holiday memories tied to the death of somebody that's very close to them. I can see this song really meaning a lot and having a lot of sadness around the listening of this song for that person. It's just me personally, I don't have that.
Yeah, and I can say with personal experience that I have lost someone around Christmas. So, and I don't necessarily still become more emotionally attached to the song because of that. But I get it. I would totally get where somebody could and would.
So I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover with Another Lonely Christmas. Do you have any other further or final thoughts on the lyrics of the song in general?
Just a few. So the song in general, I love it. It's not one that I go to very often to listen to. It's, as we've already touched on, it's sort of a one-off. It was recorded in isolation. It was recorded in February. It was, released in November. It was only played one time. So it's not one of those songs that's in the day-to-day vernacular of a Prince fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let alone the world at large. It just isn't. But when it comes up in shuffle, it's a fun listen. Not necessarily a fun listen, but a good listen. The music is, I was listening to it last night, in preparation for a conversation, and, especially in the longer version, when you get that extra musical, extension on the end. So basically you have an extra minute of verse and an extra minute of music at the end of the song. And that extra interlude especially is gorgeous. And it reminded me quite a bit. I don't know if anybody else might have this takeaway of Alexa de Paris, the musicality in that song. Although the instrumentation was quite a bit different. This is much more organic with what sounds like real live drums and piano playing, whereas the other one is much more synth oriented. But it's just pretty, and especially the piano playing. Oh my gosh, the guitars are actually fairly low in the mix. They're sort of background, but the piano in certain sections of this song is beautiful, and he really, puts his thumbnail down on the keys and drags them back and forth, and that sweeping. It's an emotional swell done musically, and it's gorgeous. So musically, I think the song is wonderful. When it's allowed to be, a lot of the times it's just sort of focused on the story, but when it gets musical, it's terrific. And then as a small aside, just again, a minor footnote to the song, and I had to do the research on this. There was a version of this song released other than on the I Would Die For You single. There was a version of the song released as a promo in Japan by what I think, if I read it correctly, it was like an offshoot of Warner Brothers Records or something, and it's actually referred to as Syndicate, where the edited version of the song is side A, and on side B were all these little recordings of Prince, Sheila E., and Apollonia, if I have that correctly, doing different introductions to songs or a Christmas greeting, because it was released, I think Syndicate was released in December, around the same time that the 12-inch version was released. So it would have been a few weeks after the initial 7-inch release. But anyway, I just think that's an interesting footnote. To the release versions. So.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Okay. Well, thank you. That was very well said, Todd. So we've reached the end of the episode. Thank you again for being my guest to talk about Another Lonely Christmas.
A lot of fun. And again, the song's not fun, but so said a different way, it's been enjoyable.
We can have fun. We can enjoy talking about a song, even if the song's lyrics are a little heavy. So
Agreed.
I think that this is a good case of that. Good example.
Yeah.
So where can people find you, Todd, if they wanted to say hi to you or just check out what you're up to?
Yeah, I hope they do. Really the main source of my output, which is just commentary on the world or things about Prince or just funny things, is Twitter. And that's how I came to connect with you. And I hope people look me up there. My Twitter handle is simple. It's my first initial and my last name and my birthday. So T Sanzone 513 is my Twitter handle, or you can look me up as TVS at home.
Okay, thank you again.
Yeah,
And you can find me on Twitter at PressRewind75, Instagram as well, and I have a Facebook page. Hope you enjoyed being on the show, Todd. And
I did. Thank you.
Until next time, thank you very much, and goodbye.